Welcome back to Inside the Helmet. My name is Michael, and joining me, as always, now is my dad. So,
Uh,
hello.
so now it's as always. That's funny. I
You
started out
plan
as
on
I
leaving?
started out the first couple times as special guest. I guess after a certain amount of time, you're as always. But no, happy to be here. I'm
No,
I'm
you're
actually
special, all right.
I'm actually happy to be an as always now contributor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Indeed.
So our topic for inside the helmet portion of the show is where we talk about for anybody who may be listening for the first time, we try to talk about things that athletes and coaches know, and maybe fans in the stands don't know, at least on this level, that may not be as aware of it, because there's really two different games that are happening. There's the one that people see from the stands, and then there's the one that's happening on the sideline in the field and in the locker rooms and all of that. And the topic this week has to do with leadership, because it's no secret that teams that tend to do well have good leaders. And you and I have both been on, or whether we're playing or coaching, any number of different teams, so we've seen a lot of different types of leadership, and I wanted to explore that just a little bit. I guess I'll just open it up by asking you straight up, tell me the things that you've seen. What makes a good leader on a football field to you?
Well, overall, I would say the most important quality of a good leader is the ability to instill belief in his teammates. And one key example, of course, you grew up watching Roger Staubach, and I grew up listening to you talk about him. And so I've heard before, whether it was from you or we were watching some documentary, that Roger's teammates would always, of course, sing many praises about him as great a quarterback and even greater man that he is. That he was a great leader. And one thing his teammates would always say about him is that it didn't matter the score, how much the Cowboys were winning or losing by, or how much time was left on the clock. As long as Roger was leading them, they always felt like they had a chance. So I believe that that's first and foremost the most important ability for a leader to have, or a quality that makes a good leader, is the ability to instill confidence and hope where the situation might look bleak.
Yeah, I think I've heard, like you said, multiple guys have mentioned that about Roger Staubach, and my favorite version of that quote was that one of the teammates said, Roger Staubach never lost a game in his career. He just
He
ran out of
ran out of
time.
time. Yep.
Yeah. That if they would have stayed out there, he would have played until he found a way to win. And
Mhm.
there's an old story from back in yesteryear
I know where
where
you're going with this. I was about to tell it.
oh, you were the Bob Hayes story.
Yep.
Okay, well, for those who don't know the story, Bob Hayes was the fastest man, not only in the NFL, but the fastest man on earth for a while. He won a gold medal in the 1968 Olympics, I believe it was. And Bob Hayes was a guy who was not just a track guy that they tried to make into a football player. He was a football player who just happened to be really, really fast. I mean, think like Tyreek Hill type of a guy. And except he was faster. But Bob Hayes is the one that made the NFL stop running so much man defense all the time and implemented zone defenses, because he was so fast he could run by people. So the Cowboys had Bob Hayes in Roger Staubach's early career. That was his big play receiver. And one day, I think it was during training camp, Roger, he's probably being goofy or something, but he
Mhm.
challenged Bob Hayes to a race, sprint, 60 yards or whatever it was.
It was 40.
Was it 40? I knew it
Yeah.
was. It was not the full 100.
Mhm.
And Bob Hayes, of course, laughed, and he said, "Okay, sure." and they raced, and typically, as you would expect, Bob Hayes won pretty easily. And then Staubach said, "Let's go again." And they raced again, and Bob Hayes won again. And Staubach wouldn't quit. He kept challenging him and kept challenging him. And
Hmm.
finally, after I don't know how many races, I'm sure I've heard, but I've forgotten the number, how
Yeah.
many times they raced, finally, Staubach beat him and said, "Okay, I'm done." So
Yep.
relentless. Just a guy who says, "Look, I have to win, not just I want to win." And so, yeah, that's one type of a leader. And also, just before your time, not as far back as Staubach, I know we've talked many times about back when the Cowboys were relevant, winning Super Bowls in their glory days of the '90s. They had two different types of leaders on that team, and at least on offense, the Troy Aikman type and the Michael Irvin type. Two totally different types of leaders, right?
Right. Exactly. We were talking about it right before the show, talking about kind of what we wanted to talk about and how we wanted to go about it, how we wanted to structure things. And one thing that you threw out there was that it's important to mention that even though the quarterback is seen typically as the face of the team and the most important person on the field, the quarterback said humbly, um,
Uh,
the leader doesn't always necessarily have to be the quarterback. And one prime example of that I like to look at is Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin. Troy Aikman, of course, now best known for using his voice as an announcer. While he was still playing, was a lot more of the quieter, lead by example type, and then maybe single a guy out and lead them individually if needed, while Michael Irvin was the much more vocal, fiery, be loud, rah rah, energize everybody type of guy. And as a quarterback, I'll kind of dip into my own personal philosophy about how I conduct things. I very much subscribe to the Troy Aikman podcast about leadership, in that I, as well, like Aikman, tend to think of myself as a more quiet, lead by example type. Um,
yeah, Aikman was a perfectionist and expected perfection out of everybody else. Or
mhm.
and Irvin, man, I've heard some of the speeches he's given before. He is so passionate when he wants to flip that switch that I promise you, if I had one game to win and I had a guy to come in and give a pregame speech to my team, it would be Michael Irvin. So much
Yeah,
passion. He gets you to where you want to run right through a wall. So um, I know as a coach, I'm always looking for leaders on the teams that I coach, and not only on the field. You hit on the big thing is the ability to keep the guys' spirits up and keep their energy up. Maybe when things aren't going well, or if things get tight at the end and you need a score, or maybe you're on defense and you need to stop the other team to get them fired up. But I think leaders can also be really effective away from the field in the locker room, or maybe during practice, because as you
sure.
know, you get a group of guys together like that, a group of young men together, and guys have a tendency to mess with each other and have fun, and all of that in practice should be fun, but
Hmm.
there's got to be work that happens too. And I've seen some of the most effective leaders be the guys who, if their teammates were goofing around too much at inappropriate times, that they would be the ones, not the coaches. They would hold
Yeah,
their teammates accountable and say, "Hey guys, we're out here in the hot sun, sweating, trying to get better as a team. Knock it off." Uh,
yeah,
so it doesn't always have to be the rah rah stuff. It's the best teams that I've ever been on or coached had a strong component of leadership from within the player ranks, uh, there's just there's an accountability to the coaches that everybody's aware of. And because the coach
Yeah.
determines playing time, or the coaches, I should say, determine playing time, but there's a different feeling in that accountability with your own teammates if you're getting called out for not giving your best effort or not playing smart, not
Hmm.
doing your homework, studying the playbook, whatever it may be. You
Yeah.
agree? Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I think there's a little bit of psychology to that because, of course, with the dynamic between a player and a coach, the coach is obviously in a paid position of, or in most instances, paid position of authority over the player. So there's this expectation of almost like a child answering to their parent.
Right.
Whereas with teammates, why sometimes it's even more effective than a coach trying to be a leader when it's a teammate trying to lead another teammate, because you typically think of your teammates as your friends, for lack of a better word, and they're the ones that you can be a little more comfortable, let your hair down, so to speak, with. You don't have to button up and act a little bit more professional around them. So to have them, so people that you're maybe used to being a little bit more loose around, have them telling you to knock it off, I think rings a little bit louder in some people's ears, because then it truly is, oh, this person isn't just an old stickler, they're no fun, any of that. This is, okay, yeah, I'm taking it too far.
Yeah. I mean, the leaders, I don't know if your generation did this, but my generation, at the end of football practice, when everybody was tired, the coach would make you run gassers,
Hmm.
just wind sprints essentially until. And personally, as a coach, I've never been a huge believer in doing that. I think all you're doing is just making your guys tired. But
Yeah.
we would have guys during the gassers who they were taking it seriously instead of the ones who were just going, oh, when is this going to be over? And they're just dragging their feet trying to make it through to the end. And
Hmm.
they would actually challenge some of their teammates, either verbally to keep up with them, or maybe in a quieter way, setting an example. Hey, this guy's out here breathing deep, and he's as tired and hot as I am. And look at how much effort he's giving. And so you want to match that.
Hmm. For sure.
So, yeah. So, all different kinds of leaders, I think, on a team. And uh, I don't know. I think if you have strong player leadership, you've got a chance. You have to have talent, obviously, and good coaching too. But that's one of those little overlooked things when people talk about what's the difference between a good team and a great team. I'd be willing to bet you most great teams have a very strong leadership component somewhere in there.
I'd be willing to agree with that.
Yeah. So we always touch on our beloved Dallas Cowboys, and hey, they won this past week.
How
Uh,
about it?
how about that? And they actually looked pretty good and pretty strong doing it. And my Cowboy friends on social media were posting, uh, you know, oh, see the turnaround. This is what we've been waiting for.
We beat the
But start.
Raiders.
Well, I know that's what I was saying. Tap the brakes. It's the Raiders. Uh,
Exactly.
don't buy your Super Bowl tickets just yet. But the thing that surprised me, we have been talking now for a couple of weeks, ever since the Cowboys traded for Quinnen Williams,
Hmm.
about is that a good move? Is it a bad move? Will it make a difference? And well, for one game against the Raiders, it did. He came in his first action. He's a little bit bigger guy than I remembered him being. I knew he was massive, but he looked pretty big. He definitely played big. And the thing that I saw out of the Cowboys defense was they were getting pressure on the quarterback from the interior with
Yeah.
Quinnen Williams, Kenny Clark, and Odigizua. And you always think about getting pressure on the quarterback as those edge rushers, the Micah Parsons and Miles Garrett's and Max Crosby, people like that.
Yeah,
Interesting to see if this was just a one-off game because it was against the Raiders' offensive line has all kinds of problems, or could this maybe be something where the Cowboys just find a different way to get pressure on the quarterback? And I wanted to ask you about that. You've had pressure up the middle, you've had pressure around the edge. For people who've never suited up and gotten out there and taken snaps as a quarterback, talk about the difference and how you handle it and what it means to have pressure coming from those different places.
for sure. Funny enough, I think I would personally have a harder time dealing with the strong rush coming straight down the middle rather than coming off the edge, because as a quarterback, if you're taught in practice, you do numerous different drills with footwork and stepping up in the pocket, rolling out, all sorts of different things. And I feel like when you are facing pressure from straight up the middle, not only do you have to then assess, okay, which direction do I go to escape this? Do I go to my left, go to my right? There's that decision to be made in an instant. And then now that you're on the run, you're out of the pocket, then you kind of have to do some of that Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes improvising, which always, unless you're one of them or someone of a similar caliber, it can be very difficult to do. Whereas if you, and maybe this is just the pocket passer ness in me speaking, but I always am more comfortable when I'm in the pocket. And so when I'm facing pressure coming around the edge and I can just step up in the pocket, I find that a lot easier to deal with than somebody coming straight at me and then I have to run away.
Yeah, and I mean, if a guy's an edge rusher, if it's always coming from the edge, and you can identify the dominant edge rusher, you can
Hmm.
always roll away from
Yeah.
where that pressure is coming from and
Hmm.
maybe get a clean look. One thing that I noticed was happening with the Raiders quarterback, even when they didn't get to him, there were a couple of times he couldn't complete the throwing motion because he had a teammate being shoved backwards into him, and he would hit his arm on on this teammate's helmet, and so he couldn't complete and get everything on the pass.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and there's always that danger. You'll see it happen from time to time, where it's not just that you can't complete the throwing motion with your arm, but you get that dreaded finger that smacks into the teammate's helmet.
Hate that.
Yeah, and you wind up with a dislocated throwing finger or something like that. I think when you get pressure straight up the middle too, the quarterbacks are on their heels within half a second of getting the snap. Which I don't know if you saw what I saw, but it seemed like Geno Smith was throwing with his weight backwards a lot.
I noticed that too. And that's a very dangerous place to be as a quarterback.
Yeah, you wind up hanging the ball up there and getting interceptions. So,
Yeah.
um, so for our college football topic this week, uh, just have to acknowledge for one half, the Longhorns held kind of close to Georgia. And then the second half, it all fell apart. And in college football, pretty much once you lose that third game, your chances of making the
Yeah.
playoffs, yeah, pretty much gone. I guess maybe if they are able to beat A&M, uh, maybe if other
I think
teams
we would.
lose.
Yeah, I was about to say we don't control our own destiny anymore. We not only would need to win out against, of course, a very good A&M team, but then we would also need a few of those lower playoff teams to lose so that we could
Yeah,
squeak in. I don't see it happening.
yeah, I'm not counting on it.
No.
And um, I did predict though last week that I think that they'll beat A&M regardless of what happens with Georgia. Georgia scared me a lot more than A&M does. Although
Yeah,
the A&M comeback, did you happen to see that?
I did.
Uh,
I have a few friends that are A&M fans, and before the comeback started, I was kind of poking fun at them
well, we
for
all were, of
being down
course.
30-3, and then when they came back and I saw that, because I had turned the game off by that point, I started to feel my own words being shoved back down my throat.
We actually had it on, and I was watching it, and boy, in the first half, A&M just couldn't do anything right at all. I mean, it was so one sided,
Mm.
and uh, then when A&M made a play finally in the second half and made that first score, I said, no, I'm not saying they're coming back, but I mean that's how it starts. You get a score fairly early in the third quarter, turn momentum, and then just yeah, really, really remarkable. I think they said that was the biggest comeback in A&M history, and everything just has to go right. But still, the team that showed up for A&M in the first half, I think that team could also show up against the Longhorns.
Yeah, that's
And
one thing I was thinking is if sure they came back against a who did they play, South Carolina?
yeah,
Um, South Carolina obviously are they even ranked?
no,
I think they were pretty highly ranked at the beginning of the year, and they have just fallen, not lived
well
up to
they had a
expectations.
mostly they had a quarterback that was
Yeah.
Heisman Trophy hopeful and had struggled this year, and then in the
Hmm.
first half, boy, he looked like you saw the reason for all of the hype,
Yeah.
and he lived up to it. And then, boy, in the
Hmm.
second half, it just really flipped the script. I got to say, I was really, really impressed with A&M's receivers in
Hmm.
the second half,
Yeah.
and boy, they could be trouble for Texas. We'll see. Uh, I still think Texas wins it. It is going to be played in Austin, and uh, after all of the hype and everything last year, them getting together and A&M came out flat. I could be wrong. Maybe A&M's been mad about it for a year, and they're going to really bring it. but but we'll see. The other thing in college football I wanted to touch on was this little Cinderella team that just keeps winning and finds itself for weeks now as the number two team in the nation in Indiana. I've had a little bit of an opportunity to watch them and watch their quarterback. He's getting a lot of the publicity, and
Hmm.
it's so interesting nowadays that it wasn't like this several decades ago, where you could get a team like Indiana that could suddenly come from out of nowhere and be
Yeah.
regarded as one of the best in the nation because there used to be such a big difference in athletes. I mean, in the size and the strength and the I don't know, the from the workout equipment and uh, just the big schools had the resources to attract these elite athletes, the 4 stars, the 5 stars, or maybe turn a 3 star recruit into a 4 star player
Yeah.
because they had the TV contracts. And now,
Hmm.
of course, you can tune in any game that you want to if you have the right subscription. I mean, I tend to when we're when we're recording the podcast on Wednesday nights, I tend to put on whatever small college game is on right now. I'm got Miami, Ohio at Buffalo, right? So that's on ESPN too.
Yeah.
And there was a time when if you didn't go to one of the big name schools, you didn't get on TV. And well, I mean, there's an excitement about getting on TV in the first place, but if you actually have NFL aspirations, you've got to get exposure.
Yeah.
And so you had to go to one of the big schools, and I think that's what changed. So that created a situation where a team like Indiana suddenly finds themselves ranked number two, right behind Ohio State. Have you had a chance to even see them? I mean, are they legit? We've seen plenty of teams where, yeah, they're ranked high, but once the playoffs start, the athletes are just different, and the bubble is burst for Cinderella.
I've seen highlights. Of course, everyone looks good in the highlights. I'm trying to see who they're playing this weekend so that I can kind of declare, all right, I'll do my homework. Um,
I don't even know what
they
Indiana's best win of the year is.
I thought you were about to say I don't even know where Indiana is. They beat
Oh,
Oregon 30-20 when Oregon was ranked third. They
okay.
beat Illinois, who was ranked ninth at the time, 63-10.
Huh.
I guess I'm not sure. I'm on ESPN.com here. I'm not sure if that 9 by Illinois and that 3 by Oregon, that would have to be the rankings at the time because A&M is third now.
Sure.
I would imagine, yeah. Um, I but to finish my declaration to watch them this weekend, I don't think they're playing this weekend. They're on a bye. They have Purdue at Purdue next weekend, so
Okay.
I will not be doing any homework this weekend. Um, One thing I wanted to add to your little speech about how you get these Cinderella schools because the really good athletes now don't have to just go to the biggest markets in order to get on TV and get exposure for the NFL purposes. I think a lot of it, of course, comes down to you mentioned how the bigger schools would just have the better athletes, which would prevent a smaller school from really having a fighting chance. And a lot of it, of course, comes down to player development, not only in football technical skill, but just in overall athleticism and strength and speed. And I feel like
Sure.
social media has really done a number to expand knowledge. Whereas in the past, maybe only the bigger schools had really the knowledge and expertise because they could hire the best strength coaches and all that. Now you can just go on social media and see a billion different videos about what real college athletes post about their workouts. And so there are more young athletes who are growing up following more sophisticated and well designed and researched workout programs. And so there just are more good athletes nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to size, I think there was a time when the teams. Well, I mean Texas, of course. I've been watching them forever, but Texas, Oklahoma, USC, Notre Dame, they would take all of the big athletes, or
Hmm.
all the athletes who had the prototypical size that you would want, and you'd get a game where Texas offensive and defensive lines outweighed their opponent by 60 pounds a man or something.
Hmm.
And not saying that it doesn't still happen sometimes when they play, but there's other games where the difference is really not that great. And
Yeah.
uh, I know that having walked down on many fields that you've been on, and your some of your teammates that I've seen who are not, hate to say this, but they're probably not NFL bound. But I'm surprised at how big they are in person.
Yeah.
And if you look at their measurables, their height and their weight, you know what? It's not that much different. Maybe it just has to do at this point the the so-called NFL prospects and everything. It has to do with their flexibility, their reaction time, their knowledge, experience. Maybe it's something other than
Hmm.
just prototypical size. Because um, I don't know if you've ever mentioned this to your audience before I started getting your podcast. I mean,
Hmm.
you're probably about the same size that Peyton Manning was when he was your age. I mean, you're
Hmm.
both 6'5", and I
Yeah.
haven't asked you how much you weigh now, but I know at one point you said you were about 210, 215, which,
It's about where I am still.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of NFL quarterbacks out there that are 6'4", 6'5", and maybe 225, 230. So you're not too far off of that.
Yeah.
And
That's actually a really good, I guess, segue into what I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind listening to you here of how, yeah, even at some way smaller schools, that the athletes are still very big, of course, very tall. They weigh a lot, particularly if they're linemen. But then why aren't they, if they have the measurables on paper, why aren't they at a bigger school? Or why aren't they maybe as good as somebody at a bigger school that has the same exact measurables? What sets them apart? And in terms of size and physiology and all that, I think the biggest thing now, it's not even necessarily about how much you weigh or how tall you are. Obviously, you have a lot less control over your height than you do your weight. But to put it simply, any offensive lineman could get themselves up to 280, 300 pounds if they needed to. But that even D3 linemen. But
sure.
then, like you mentioned, the flexibility and all that, it's not about just what the scale says, it's about what kind of weight it is. You can't just be a balloon.
Right.
It should be 300 pounds of reasonably, strong muscle.
Well,
You know.
and on the flip side, when we're not talking about the really big guys,
Hmm.
I've seen plenty of teammates that you've played with over the years at all
Hmm.
different levels who had speed to burn. I mean, really, really fast guys.
Yeah.
I remember the first time, if I mentioned Danny, you know who I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Very first time that I met Danny, and you guys were out throwing the ball, and I was like, man, this dude has got speed. He's got hands. He's got move. Why isn't he at some bigger school somewhere? And there are a number of reasons. He may have been just a little bit light, um, to be at one
Yeah.
of the bigger schools. And there were other, I guess, reasons, maybe academic
Off
reasons,
the
and
field issues, yeah.
yeah, some
If
off
we're
the
talking
field
about him
things.
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, but
But
so you'll
you,
you'll find guys at all levels who have
mhm,
elite speed
yeah.
or elite size.
Hmm.
It's just you've got to have all of these things mixed together. We could probably, between you and me, we would never do it on air because we don't want
Yeah.
to embarrass anybody, but we could probably sit and go through a list of guys who had, if there were 5 components that you had to have to make it big, they maybe had 4 of them, and we could see very evident what the fifth thing that was missing was.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's within their power that, oh gee, they kind of earn that with their efforts or lack of efforts, and other
Yeah.
times it's just dumb luck.
Hmm.
The ones that are always really sad are the guys that you see who are really dedicated, put in the time, they've got the god-given talent and everything else, and then they just can't stay healthy.
For sure. You mentioned guys that have it all physically. They have, whether it's the speed, the strength, the size, but they
Sure.
maybe just don't have the technical skill. Something's
Yeah.
missing that
Yeah.
is holding them back from being a really great football player. My mind immediately goes to John Ross. Of course,
Oh,
had
yeah, the sprinter.
speed like hardly anybody else ever. Broke the combine 40-yard dash record before Xavier Worthy shaved another hundredth off of it a few years later.
Right.
But he didn't really succeed. Now, like you mentioned, part of that was due to the fact that he couldn't stay healthy, from what I remember. But I also recall him just not being all that great of a receiver. He was, in a way, kind of. I don't mean this in a insult to John Ross or to Devin Hester, but I think that John Ross maybe was a lesser of Devin Hester, someone who had all the athleticism, all the speed, and all that, but maybe just not quite the technique and the talent to
Yeah,
be an every down player.
those two guys are night and day. Devin
Hmm.
Hester, kind of like, I mean, if you were going to say Devin Hester and Xavier Worthy, I would say the comparables between them are those were both really good football players who happened to
Hmm.
have a lot of speed. The difference between Xavier Worthy and Devin Hester, though, is Devin Hester had way more wiggle. I mean, he was
For
known
sure.
for punt returns. He was just in a phone booth quick,
Yeah,
uh, in a way that, and it's not a knock on Xavier Worthy at all because he's also quick, but there's not a whole lot of guys that were quicker than Devin Hester.
of course.
And I think Xavier Worthy had more top end speed. So there's a difference between being quick and fast.
Of course. I just mentioned Devin Hester and John Ross in the same sentence to kind of compare that they built, because Devin Hester, of course, was a return specialist.
Sure.
He wasn't an every down player. He spent some time both I think he's more known for being a receiver than being a cornerback, but I think originally he was a corner who then transitioned to being receiver as his official position. I guess they figured they could use his speed and talent more offensively than defensively because he maybe didn't have the necessary technical skill in anything other than returning.
Right.
Just as John Ross was not a more successful NFL wide receiver, of course, because of injuries, but because despite his athleticism, he did not have the necessary technical ability.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so amazing when you look at the specimens, the different
mhm.
body types, and the skill sets that different people have, and the the knowledge on how to use those skill sets, the instincts. We've talked at length before about some players just know where to be, what to do. You know, if you're on defense, they anticipate where the ball's going to go better than other people around them, and on offense, the guys with the ball in their hand who just either they see the hole and they burst to it quicker than the next guy, or maybe they can somehow feel where that hole is or where it's going to be,
Yeah.
and other guys don't have that ability. I don't know. So anyway, we said we're going to keep it shorter this week. Any
Mhm.
quick thoughts on F1? You said that they've got another race coming up this weekend, right?
Yeah, they're going to Vegas. I believe it's a Saturday night race as opposed to typically a Sunday, at least local time. That means as an American, I'm waking up at 6 a.m. to watch a race because it's on the other side of the world. But typically F1 races are, you know, about middle of the afternoon or so local time, except for a few night races. But they're still on Sunday. In Vegas, it's going to be a Saturday night race. There is a reason for it. I think it has to do with people traveling to the race, and the fact that it's in Vegas and they'll stay and then go back to work on Monday. Something along those lines. I think I heard it last year in the lead up to the race. Um, it's a very, very sad, very depressing situation after Max's, of course, heroic comeback drive, starting in the pit lane and finishing in third, which he could have at least had a fighting chance for the win, um, had he not made a late pit stop because his tires were heavily worn down with only a few laps left, and Lando Norris would have been on his heels in a few laps anyway, and he wouldn't have had much chance to defend. A lot of people think he at least would have been able to finish second without that pit stop, if even if Lando had passed him with the fresher tires. But he still finished third, still had an incredible race. But because Lando won, it essentially made Max's efforts useless because now all Lando needs to do is outscore Max by 9 points, and Max is mathematically out of the championship fight,
Mm.
which is really, really sad. Of course, maybe a month ago or so, we were talking about how, not even a month ago, we were talking about, or I was anyway, talking about how strong Max had been and how he just feels unstoppable. And it feels like in the past few weeks or so, that's kind of been getting chipped away, with Lando winning the past two races in Brazil and then Mexico before that, and Max still doing really well, but of course he's already fighting an uphill battle, and so the fact that his main competitor is also doing really well makes it almost impossible. Of course,
Yeah.
I'm not going to give up hope until he's mathematically eliminated, but it's not looking very good. My only hope for this weekend is that Las Vegas, the track there has not been kind to McLaren in the two races that we've been there, with the first one being in 2023. Max won that one, and then last year George Russell won it for Mercedes. That Mercedes car in 2024 was absolutely suited for the Vegas track, and they were able to dominate. It looked like the late 2010s all over again. But McLaren has not been very strong in Vegas, so I'm hoping certainly that trend continues. But of course, they've looked more dominant than they almost ever have been this year, and so you never know.
Maybe what happened with Max is we talked so much about Max, and I know he's your favorite guy, and you're always
Hmm.
rooting for him. And maybe what happened is Max listened to this podcast too much, and he got a big head, and took his foot off the gas and just figured, well, if I'm that great, Michael says I'm that great. So he kind of let up a little bit. He lost some of that adrenaline. um
Maybe so.
so you're
It's all my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um
I hope he
so
can forgive me.
actually, yeah, no, actually, what I was going to say for real is that every once in a while, if somebody is winning, it makes it a little bit more interesting for someone else to win.
Hmm.
We've talked before in the past about love Patrick Mahomes. Just everything about the guy is fantastic. Uh, First ballot Hall of Fame guy, and seen him do things I've never seen anybody else do.
Hmm.
But I've got Chiefs fatigue. I mean,
Yeah.
once my Cowboys get eliminated, I used to automatically go, all right, well, it's time to go root for Mahomes. But I mean, they've made like what, five of the last six Super Bowls or somewhere. It feels like it.
I think
And,
so. Yeah.
yeah, whatever it is, it's you almost kind of want to see somebody else for a change, and I mean, that's good for the sport. So
Yeah.
if Max isn't not able to pull it off this year, yeah, give somebody else their due, and
Hmm.
then that creates more intrigue for the next season. Well, can the former champion come back? And I mean, they built a whole Rocky Balboa franchise out of
Hmm.
that, right?
Yeah.
once once
Yeah,
Rocky was the champion. So
I
it
just had a
creates
really
more
interesting.
drama.
I just had a really interesting thought since you bring up Patrick Mahomes. Of course, if you were following the NFL around 2018, 2019, 2020, of course, that was kind of the transition from the Patriots' reign over the NFL to when the Chiefs started taking over. And then,
Sure.
um, and then in this past Super Bowl, the Eagles took down the Chiefs and kind of knocked them off their pedestal. I feel like a very similar trend has happened in F1, where the I guess Patriots dynasty for F1 was Mercedes and particularly Lewis Hamilton when he won his championships in 2014, 15, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Of course, his 2008 championship as well, but he had his own dynasty run, and then Max came along in 2021 and won the championship, being the Patrick Mahomes in this example.
Yeah.
And of course, the people that were ready to see Lewis and Mercedes get toppled by somebody else were, of course, happy to see Max win and see somebody else at the top for a change. But then, of course, Max kept winning, and so like people have gotten sick and tired of the Chiefs winning. People have gotten a lot more tired of Max winning. But then, and I'm maybe I'm being too harsh on the Eagles because I'm a Cowboys fan, but I think they fit this, at least personally for me, they fit this example really well. Now what's happened is just like the Chiefs were toppled by the Eagles, which is obviously a team that I don't like. I don't like the Eagles. As tired as I'll ever be of the Chiefs, I would never want the Eagles to be the one to take them down.
Sure.
Even if I wasn't a Max fan, if I was a Max hater and I did not want to see Max ever win another race in his time in F1, I would much rather Max keep winning than have McLaren and especially Lando Norris be the ones to knock him off the top step because they have kind of had their own underdog story, come up story, kind of like Rocky, but they've done it in the most egotistical, the least humble way possible. That all they have
Yeah.
done is complain and I make excuses, and they're just really bad sports, is the point I'm trying to get at. And so I understand the sentiment of wanting somebody else to win for a change. And I get that, but this is maybe the worst possible scenario for who could be the ones to replace the old regime at the top. Kind of like how the Eagles, of course, not for us because we're Cowboys fans and we always hate them, but the Eagles were kind of seen in a light-hearted way. They were kind of underdogs. Jalen Hurts, of course, with his story being at Alabama, then going to Oklahoma and working his way up and growing as an NFL quarterback. A lot of people rooted for him, and of course that and the Eagles and Nick Sirianni and all that. McLaren and Lando Norris had their own kind of come up where people almost pitied them and felt bad for them at times because it felt like they just couldn't catch a break. But then now they have finally made it big and they're being total jerks about it.
And for the record, the I find it so ironic that my favorite movie of all time is Rocky, set in
Mhm,
Philadelphia, and my ringtone on my phone is the Rocky theme.
mhm,
And yet, the team that is the arch rival now for the Cowboys is the Eagles. It was not when I was growing up. It was
mhm,
what we used to call them, the Redskins.
mhm.
And
And your favorite
the
band is the Eagles.
well, yeah. Ironically, if somebody said you
Mhm,
had one CD to play and you got to drive across the United States, I'm putting on probably the Eagles' greatest hits,
mhm,
just because I never get tired of that. It's very ironic, and Uh,
Mhm.
but as far as the players themselves that come and go, I am actually a Jalen Hurts fan. I've been a Saquon Barkley fan. It doesn't have anything to do with the players. It doesn't have anything to do with the city. I think what it has to do with is that the Eagles fans really, really hate the Cowboys. And they're
Yeah.
so vocal about it that whenever they interview the Eagles fans, it's the Eagles fans have this extra level of venom for the Cowboys that
Hmm.
other teams don't. And so naturally, there's a reciprocity. Well, gee, if they hate us that much, then we hate them back as much.
Hmm.
Uh, but for the record, I didn't grow up hating the Eagles. Back when they had Harold Carmichael and Ron Jaworski and Wilbert Montgomery, look it up if you're not old enough to know who I'm talking about. Yeah, those guys were actually kind of cool. They didn't win a whole lot, and they weren't a big threat to my beloved Cowboys. The Redskins were the ones back then. And by the time that the Giants started winning Super Bowls in the 80s and early 90s with Lawrence Taylor, the
Hmm.
Cowboys were not contenders. That was the end of the Tom Landry era, beginning of the Jimmy Johnson era. And so the
Yeah.
Giants have never had that venom because when they were good, the Cowboys
Hmm.
weren't. So uh, just
It,
wanted to
yeah.
clarify for the record, we reference a lot that, well, we can't stand the Eagles. Yeah, it's more of out of respect that they are
Hmm.
the threat. They're the ones that, we figure, well, if we're going to win the NFC East, we're going to have to get past the Eagles,
Yeah.
and the fact that their fans hate us so much, so we're just returning it. But um,
I don't
anyway,
like Nick Sirianni though. I don't like him. I think he's
you know
extremely
what?
arrogant.
I
I
think
don't
I
like
think I think he's one of those guys. If he's your coach, maybe you're just a little bit embarrassed by his
him. Hmm.
antics. But if he's producing the results, you go, well, okay,
Yeah.
we'll live with it. And he's my guy. I don't. He hasn't done anything that's just so bad that makes me go, ooh, I can't stand
He's
that guy.
pretty. I don't know. I've seen some instances where he's been really immature and all
Sure.
that, and he's just
Well,
acted the way that I don't feel like an NFL I feel like he acts like he's a strength coordinator. You know, the ones that you expect to kind of flex on people and yell
well, I didn't
fiery
say
and
I didn't
go
say
full.
that he's invited for Thanksgiving dinner. He's not my favorite guy, but
Obviously,
it, but I mean,
I
keep it
get
all
it.
in perspective.
He is his own personality, and I just can't stand it. But
Sure.
that's my taste.
Yeah. Well, he
Yeah,
probably wouldn't like either one of us either. So,
yeah.
and I bet he
Just
doesn't
like
even listen to the pod. I bet he doesn't even listen to every podcast that we do. I bet he
wow,
skips them. Yeah.
no way.
So, yeah, I bet he does. He may not even
The
hear us
nerve,
talking about him tonight because he
the
may be
nerve.
doing something else.
I ordered him a shirt and everything. I'm gonna cancel that order right now.
Right. So, anyway, if anybody happens to be in Philadelphia listening to the podcast, just understand, it's
We're
all
gonna
in
take you
good.
down on Sunday.
It's
Understand that.
it's all it's all in good sports rivalry fun, and yeah, I love beating the Eagles now because it means
Uh,
something. Because
yeah.
because even before they won the Super Bowl, it- beating a good team means something to your team.
Mhm.
If the
Yeah.
Eagles were a lousy team and the Cowboys won, well, kind of like the way they beat the Raiders. Um, no offense to
Yeah.
Raiders fans who may be listening to this podcast either, because you guys
Marcus.
have got Super Bowls and you've done great things too. Not this year, um, but I don't know about you, but Monday night when the Cowboys were beating up the Raiders,
Eh.
uh, I was kind of going, "Yay!"
Yeah.
I'm very glad that the Cowboys didn't come out and lay an egg against the Raiders,
Obviously.
but it's hard to get really excited. And if the Cowboys come out and beat the Eagles, I'm going to be pretty happy, pretty
Oh
fired
yeah.
up. If the Cowboys don't beat the Eagles, I'm not going to get that down because, I mean, come on.
Mhm. Can
So,
you believe
anyway,
for how can you believe for how much our season has been a struggle? We are second in our division. at what are we 4-4-1 or something, or 4-5-1?
Yeah, 4-5-1, and I've
That's
said
pretty crazy.
I've been saying to people in college football, you're in it until you lose your third game, which our beloved
Hmm.
Longhorns lost their third game. In the
Yeah.
NFL, I've always said you're in it until realistically, you're in it until you lose your sixth game. Well, the
Yeah.
Cowboys are as close to that as they could
Hmm.
possibly get. And guess what? Their next two opponents are the Eagles and the Chiefs
Oh
on
boy.
Thanksgiving Day.
Oh
So
boy.
you get the last two Super Bowl participants, and
Last two Super Bowl champions as well.
well, that too.
Mm-hmm.
So if they go from 5 losses to 7 losses and one tie, we could be having a whole different conversation about and we'll explore that in future episodes of the podcast.
If we need to, yeah.
What happens when I'm not talking about when your team is mathematically eliminated from the
Hmm.
playoffs, but when they realistically, because if you lose 6 or 7 games, you know that you don't have a Super Bowl champion team. Do you root for your team to win? Do you root for your team to get a higher draft pick? We'll explore that in future podcasts, so be sure and tune in.
Hmm.
And you know what? We kept it under an hour tonight.
Yeah, we did 56
How about
minutes
that?
and about 25 seconds. All right.
Awesome.
Well, one last thing, just because I had this in my mind, it won't even take more than like a minute or so. You're mentioning how the Eagles fans always, have extra venom when they talk about the Cowboys. That made me think about how it's not just Oklahoma. Talking about Texas rivals now, Oklahoma, A&M, maybe even a few other schools. Texas could have nothing to do with it. It could be Oklahoma versus the University of Louisiana Monroe. And every time the camera pans to the OU fans, they're going to be holding the horns down. And that just makes me
Yeah.
chuckle to think that we mean so much to them that they can't get us out of their heads even when we have nothing to do with the current situation. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, I mean, we're in their head, and
Hmm.
that's great. But honestly,
It's
if I had grown up in a household where, we were in Oklahoma or A&M fans, I'd probably be doing the horns down. I get it,
Yeah.
but
I don't think
but
I'd do
yeah,
it
we
when
don't.
the camera's pointed in my face when we're playing ULM, you know.
I think it's
I
a
don't know.
testament to the fact that you see other people doing different hand signals for their team.
Hmm.
By far, in college football, there's not a better hand signal that's more recognized and cool
Hmm.
than hook 'em horns.
Hmm.
That one
I agree.
beats. I don't. My opinion is, and it's not just because I'm a Texas fan. Uh, I can't think of anybody else who can do their little hand sign that looks as cool as hook 'em horns. But
I can't
anyway,
think of any either.
yeah.
Um,
So all
yeah,
right,
that was
we
about
kept
two
it to an
minutes.
hour.
Yep, we did. How about that? Well, um, yeah. Thank you guys for joining us. Come back next week. We'll be here. Um, bye bye.
Yeah. Have a good night, guys. Happy Wednesday.
Hmm.